Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RadioGamingTech.com video, the dream of 5 GHz continues. That's right, there are yet further rumours that we will indeed see 5 GHz be reached for Zen 3 on the desktop. We've seen Vermeer engineering samples hit 4.9 GHz, so it's not out of the question certainly that production sample silicon would be able to squeeze that extra little bit of performance out. Now, I will say, in terms of real-world gains between 4.9 and 5 GHz, it's not going to be night and day. It's not going to be profound. However, from a marketing perspective, it's huge, as there is, in the eyes of customers, in the minds of end users, there is a massive difference between seeing 4.9, because you're not thinking of the 0.9 for the most people, they're just looking at the 4 versus 5.0. It's a tremendous difference. But this information has been leaked by a YouTube channel, PC Welt. I'll of course link that video in the description of this one. And the 5900X still has 12 cores, 24 threads. As a quick refresher, AMD will be skipping the 4000 series naming scheme for the Vermeer desktop processors in an effort to be having uniform marketing across the APUs as well as desktop CPUs. I discussed and leaked that quite a while ago, but just as a quick reminder. So this 12-core, 24-thread processor will boost to 5 GHz, but there is a cost to this, and it's an interesting one, because it apparently draws 150 watts, well, at least the TDP is 150 watts. To compare that against the 3000 series, obviously it does depend upon the SKU, and whether you're overclocking and 2 trillion other variables, but the 3950X, for example, would be 105 at stock operation. Again, overclocking is a different story. I am actually really excited about this because I think it would be very interesting for numerous reasons. Again, from a marketing perspective, it's huge, but this would also mean we're looking at a considerable increase in clock frequency alone. Take IPC out of the equation just for 1 second. But against the 3900XT, which is obviously essentially a refreshed version of the 3900X, we're looking at 300 MHz increase in performance. Whereas the 3900XT had 100 MHz higher clock frequency over the 3900X. So that's 300 or 400 MHz improvement over either the XT or the 3900X, respectively. What isn't known yet, though, is how this breaks down when more CPU cores are running. As we all know, Zen is kind of interesting because the more CPU cores that come under load, it's very dynamic in how it deals with boosting. One of my earlier exclusives, and it does seem to be quite accurate now given more document leaks that I was disclosing on the channel, it does seem that the clock frequency of AMD's next generation CPUs seems a lot more stable with more cores being loaded. Now, at the end of the day, the proof in the pudding and all that stuff, I personally am always skeptical to some level until I've actually tested the product. But given the fact that we've also on this channel leaked the information of the IPC gains, which are also looking, well, to be honest with you, to be pretty damn sizable, I'm sure you'll agree that these CPUs could be very impressive. As a quick reminder, I have seen evidence, I have to be careful how I word this because I was asked to be kind of ambiguous in the statement so that the person who leaked it couldn't get into trouble, but I have seen very compelling evidence that the Zen 3 core is definitely going to be plus 15% IPC improvement for integer workloads. And for some workloads, they're actually stating that it could be up to 20%. Again, these tests were using spec view perf CPU testing, and AMD seems to be really pushing per core focus, so single core focus, which is definitely a very different strategy. This has numerous benefits. Benefit one is for the data center with Milan. It's obviously a huge benefit, but it also works out rather spiffy for games too. As games become increasingly more multi-threaded, then yeah, CPUs such as the 3700X or the 3900X do obviously scale rather well. However, just generally speaking, a ton of games now still use one worker thread, and then that worker thread obviously distributes work to other threads, other cores. So naturally, having a high single thread performance is still kind of key, and it's one reason that Intel for gaming has managed to maintain a lead. I think, given the clock frequency here, given the IPC gains, it's very difficult to imagine that a 5900X or what have you is not going to be quite a bit faster in games than even a 10900K, which would be quite the turn of events. Again, Intel are not without a counter. They do have Rocket Lake, but as a quick reminder, Rocket Lake seems to only have up to 8 CPU cores. Whether that's true or not, because it's not been officially announced by Intel. So if that is the case, it's going to be very curious to see how. Let's assume their performance is roughly equal. Maybe Rocket Lake has a small advantage. Let's just say for a second that's the case. For games, would we still see better performance in certain games because of the having additional threads for AMD? Maybe, especially in the future. We know, of course, that games are going to become increasingly CPU dependent as the next generation consoles launch. Either way, I'm really excited about this. I think that AMD's next generation processors are going to be definitely interesting. I also will be curious to see what the pricing is for these things too. I wouldn't hold my breath that we won't see a more expensive pricing, just more expensive pricing with these CPUs. I'm not saying this will be the case, but perhaps AMD will increase the price a little. Another thought too is if the information of 150 watts is also accurate, it's going to be very interesting in regards to motherboards. I'll also say that we've seen very few leaks at this point too for the CPUs. Like, yes, there's been a lot of leaks in terms of IPC gains, names and all this stuff. Again, we've discussed a lot of this on the channel. But in terms of actual benchmarks at this point, Zen 3, we expect to kind of have tons of leaks, like tons of benchmarks. But it just hasn't. Like, Zen 2 was leaking all over the place. So, I don't know what the hell's going on there. It's kind of like, like, have you guys remembered to actually disable Wi-Fi or something? Like, what's going on? AMD definitely are being a lot better at plugging leaks. And as I've said a lot of times now for the RDNA 2 information, what becomes increasingly difficult is that you have this like insular approach. So for example, a chap that's working on, let's say, the memory controller, or just for example of a specific product, might not know anything about, let's say, I don't know, something to do with the actual core of the processor, or something or the power delivery system. So it's kind of like they do their best to make sure that not everyone has full access to the puzzle unless they really need it, which means you kind of need to get leaks from project managers and stuff quite often, Or, of course, more often, it will go to, like, AIBs as they're briefing AIBs, and then it's like, are they actually giving accurate information to AIBs? Yeah, AMD are definitely getting better at the whole being secretive thing. While we're on the subject of AMD, we might as well throw something for TSMC in there, since AMD and TSMC are bestest buddies, skipping down the street going to Disneyland together. I'm not sure where that was going. I mean, obviously other than Disneyland. This report is actually courtesy of DigiTimes, and TSMC are actually ramping up production lines in preparation for 3nm. Obviously, it's going to be a while before this enters mass volume production. The 3nm node is actually not expected to enter HVM until 2022, which is obviously a couple of years from now. We're going to be seeing this new node manufacture 55,000 wafers. They are going to be of the traditional 300mm size, but we can be expecting up to 100,000 wafers per month by the year 2023. So TSMC are obviously being ultra aggressive with their process nodes at the moment. I will be watching their careers with great interest. But a couple of other very small things. Something very quick for Nvidia. This is just a quickie for you. A new game-ready driver is available. It's 465.55. It adds Nvidia Reflex to Modern Warfare / Warzone, and is also designed around Star Wars Squadrons 2. So obviously, if you play those games or you own an Nvidia card, then by golly gosh, it may be a good idea for you to pick up that driver. Also, a very small thing, Final Fantasy 16, obviously we've seen a trailer for, and there's actually a PEGI rating, and it's actually 18, which is basically obviously M for mature, which is kind of different. To my knowledge, I believe that typically the highest rating, I think, has been teen for Final Fantasy. So obviously this is a more mature / adult theme. It is worth noting that of course the game isn't out yet, so the actual rating for this could technically speaking change before release, but it would definitely be very different. I mean, I'll be interested to see what the themes are for this if the rating actually ends up being mature. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's not a huge piece of news, but it just interests me from the perspective of someone who's played a ton of Final Fantasy games. And yeah, it's just one of those things you don't expect to see for Final Fantasy. You know, okay, if it was Parasite Eve, yeah, okay, I could understand the 18 racing, but Final Fantasy, that's kind of unexpected. Also, please, let's get another Parasite Eve. Pretty please, with pink bows on top. And the very final thing I'd like to cover in this video are a couple of comments from Jim Ryan. He was boasting about the PlayStation 5 launch lineup. He says that he believes that it's the strongest line of exclusives that the PlayStation brand has ever had. This was in an interview to Games Industry. Jim Ryan said the following: "We intend to keep that going and to love and respect the PS4 community, while at the same time recognise that millions of gamers are ready and want to move on to a world of game experience that are only possible on the PS5. It's very nice to be able to demonstrate that again here at the Worldwide Studios is excelling, and the lineup of exclusive games, either at launch or in the launch window, is by far the strongest we've ever had on any new console. We tried to give you a sense of that. You would certainly get the progress that has been made with the games you saw a few months back. There was a real substance to the demonstrations. There were really strong and powerful presentations. And they're very important to us to have a talk about the business side of things, and the number side of things, just to ensure that we're going to be well accomplished by a demonstration of great next generation gameplay." I know a lot of people had mixed reactions to the fact that certain games were still coming to the PS4. I will agree that the PS5 lineup is actually pretty damn good. It's kind of interesting because this console generation, it almost feels like it snuck up on us. I think because we've been waiting for it for so long. I know that makes absolutely no sense. But it feels like we've just been waiting and waiting and waiting. So it almost feels like kind of surreal that the launch is almost here. I really am hoping that more consoles are shipped for both Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, because I know at the moment a ton of people were unable to get the PS5 pre-order, and the Xbox Series X is the same thing. It's even stranger because the Series X is selling so well in Japan as well. So I think this next 12 months in the games industry is going to be very curious to see how gamers progress to the next generation, especially given current world events are so up in the air. Yeah, so I'm really hopeful that a number of you managed to grab hold of the PS5, and as of course the Xbox Series X. It's sold out. Both of them sold out so quickly, of course, as we both know. As we all know. So yeah, it could be that for some folks, playing Spider-Man, Miles Morales or something like that, is going to need to be done on the PS4 anyway, simply because they won't be able to get a bloody PS5, which I'm sure you'll agree is kind of frustrating. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. The normal stuff. If you have, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.